good afternoon, friends, and welcome to West Indian Today. And I'm yours truly, your host and host, Imran Ahmad. I want to say thank you for welcoming us into your television sets, and of course, thank you for welcoming us into your homes through the means of your television sets. We're indeed very, very honored and delighted to present to you today's program on the kind courtesy of the ITV Gold Management, and also on behalf of Parikh Worldwide Media. Our chairman, Padma Shri, Dr. Sudhir Parikh, has allowed us once again this great opportunity. And today it's actually my favorite form of discussion for our program as we talk about the issues. And as many of you know, that we are in the midst of a special election for the Ombudsman, or for the Public Advocate, as we mentioned on last week's program. The Public Advocate was previously occupied by the newly elected Attorney General, Tish James, and once occupied by Mark Green, also was occupied by our current Mayor, Bill de Blasio. The Public Advocate, as many of you know, is also a member, it's a non-voting member of City Council, yet they can co-sponsor or also propose new legislation. And with over a dozen candidates up in the race for the Public Advocate in the special election, which will take place on the 26th of February, there are many of those candidates that we are going to follow up with. We're going to introduce them to you so that you get an idea of what their ideas are, their stances, and everything as we're leading up to the special election. Joining with me on deck here is a person who basically exemplifies the meaning of the American dream, living the American dream. He's been an advocate for small businesses, for low-income families, and also he's a member of City Council in District 37, a former educator, and also a former member of the New York State Assembly, also candidate for Public Advocate. He joins with me on deck to talk to you about the issues if he is elected to be the Public Advocate, none other than Council Member Rafael Espinal. It's my pleasure to have you despite your very hectic schedule. Thank you for coming down.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Pleasure is all mine. So, Mr. Council Member, as we are, we're about a few weeks away from the special election, and I've got to say that many people are throwing in their own endorsements, their own nominations. This discussion came because a close friend of mine basically publicly endorsed you, and for various reasons that I'll come to later on in the program. But I want to give you the opening soundbite, the opening few words, because for those of you who are not too familiar about District 37 and some of the legislation you proposed in your time as our City Council, and I want them to get an understanding as to who you are and some of the things that you've done with the City Council.
Yeah, well, I've been in the City Council for 5 years now. I was in the State Assembly for two. So I've been in office for 7 years in total. I ran at the age of 26, 27 years old, making me the youngest member of the State Assembly when I got elected. And I have to say, it wasn't an easy path to get elected to office, but it came with a lot of hard work that I believe was instilled in me growing up in East New York, Brooklyn, to parents who were immigrants that came to this country in the 70s to be able to live the American dream. They came here, raised 6 children, bought a home, had union work, were able to save money because of the opportunities the city had available back then, right? The city was much more affordable. The opportunity of finding a job was much easier, especially for those who were able to come to this country and probably don't have the proper education to be able to get a good paying job. That was all available back then. So I went to college, I graduated college not knowing that I'd be involved in politics, but always with a question on the back of my mind of why isn't government delivering on the issues that my community is seeing on a daily basis? Why isn't government making the right investments in my neighborhood to make sure that my community is a livable community? I think that my community has suffered through a lot of the issues we see in a lot of immigrant neighborhoods, and that's disinvestment. That's not investing in the schools so that our children can have the best opportunities. That's not investing in affordable housing so that people can be able to live in those communities. Investing in the overall infrastructure. So when I ran for office, I ran on that platform. Right. How do we make city and state finally listen to neighborhoods like ours that have been ignored for a very long time, so that our children and new immigrant families that come into this country have a better opportunity at being able to live the American dream the way you were able to once do back in the 70s and 80s. And I believe that the reason that it's harder and harder to live the American dream is because it's getting more and more expensive to be able to make it here in this city. If you're a tenant, the rent is too high. If you're a homeowner, your property taxes are too high.
Correct.
If you're a small business, the rents to own that business is too high. The fines and the fees and the permitting is too high. So across the board, the city has become so unaffordable that has made it impossible for anyone to come here with a suitcase and say, this is where I'm going to create my American dream in this city. I want to be able to, as public advocate, find out what are the issues that are not being addressed. Why isn't the city and the state making these investments, finding ways to make it more affordable for all of us, so that we won't feel as if we're being squeezed out of the city, so that we won't feel that we have to leave the city and move somewhere else to be able to get those or capture that dream that we're trying to create for ourselves and our families. It's just getting harder and harder to live here, and that's what I'm really focused on.
Definitely. So candidate for ombudsman is actually talking about preserving the vitality and also keeping affordability just right here in the city for low income as well as all residents, immigrants as well, those who aspire to live the American dream. We have various issues. You touched upon a lot that I want to talk about. So let's see, with a given time, how much we can really cover. But as public advocate, I know that there are many things actually as, the public advocate, they're responsible for investigating city agencies that are not working efficiently and whatnot. We're going to come to a few of them, but I know that prior to this, you've been an advocate for climate change. In fact, you believe that by the year 2030, that all houses in the city should invest in renewable energy and whatnot. When we talk about climate change, a recent bill was signed by Governor Cuomo that is a ban on plastic bags. In the State of the City address, Mayor Bill de Blasio also introduced, or he proposed, that there should also be a ban on plastic straws as well. Many people who are working in the plastic, while that might preserve and keep the city more greener, many people who are working in plastic factories feel that if there's a ban on that, they might face unemployment. And what do we say to those who are working in the plastic industry?
Well, I think it's important, one, to note that I am the councilman responsible for the ban on plastic straws. I am the one carrying that bill, so I was glad to hear that the mayor supports my idea. Right. At first when I heard about the ban on plastic bags, to be honest, about 5 years ago, I had the same concerns as well. How will this create issues for the job market? How will this create issues for low-income New Yorkers who depend on plastic bags? But I started thinking about the bigger picture. If we do not address these issues with waste and plastic, we're not going to have a planet to live in a few years.
Right.
We're going to have our children suffer because of the choices we made, because we believe that our own need for these plastics were more important than the future of our planet and the future of our children's lives. So I also looked at the idea that there are alternatives out there. Just because we get rid of plastic bags doesn't mean that we can't create compostable plastic bags, right? There is a shift that the market is just going to have to make naturally, but with that shift, there will still be production of a bag. Those jobs will still exist. It's just a matter of making those internal changes to keep up with the demand that the public and government is going to have from manufacturers.
If elected as our if you become our newly elected public advocate, as I mentioned, that one of the roles is actually to co-sponsor and propose new legislation, I believe. In terms of renewable energy, as the newly elected public advocate, what are some things that you're planning to propose as if given you are receiving this title?
Yeah, I think it's important for anyone who owns a home or pays an electric bill, utilities, to think about that renewable energy is going to save them a lot of money at the end of the day.
Correct.
No one really talks about that. I also believe that there probably is a push from the coal industry and maybe the natural gas industry to not want you to make that switch to renewable energy. Up front, the cost may seem like a lot to install solar panels maybe in your home or in your building, but at the end of the day, you're going to save thousands of dollars, meaning that it's going to be much more affordable for you to do business here in the city and be able to continue living in your home. So I think it's important that we look at the realistic of those numbers and make that switch, because also in the long run, we're going to have a positive impact in the environment. New York City is a coastal city. We're surrounded by water. The more ice caps melt in the North and South Poles, and the more storms that we have moving forward, the more at risk we are of losing communities along our waterways. Long Island City, you look at the Rockaways, what happened during Hurricane Sandy. So an investment in green infrastructure is an investment in the future of our city, but also, a financial investment for yourself. And I think it's important that government finally plays a role in making sure that we as New Yorkers see the value of renewable energy and start mandating that we make that switch so that we can continue having a livable and sustainable city.
Mr. Councilman, I have to say that you're a great speaker. You understand the issues, actually, and as you know, as you're talking about government, that why is government not listening to its common people? Many times, the people who tend to feel that government is, or that they're ignored by government, are owners of small businesses. I mean, they're not aware of fines, and I believe, as a city councilman, which I think I'll let you speak about that, there's something new concerning, or that you've proposed, or in terms you've been active with small businesses concerning business awnings. But if elected as public advocate, what are some of the things actually that we can advocate for small businesses who are paying way too many taxes, city taxes, each year?
Mm-hmm. Well, to go back to the legislation I just passed
Right.
last week, or about 2 weeks ago in the city council, it was a bill that was going to refund fines and fees back to small business owners who got fined by the city Department of Buildings for having awnings up and signs up without the proper permits. The issue I saw with that was that, one, 301 complaints were being made in a very abusive manner to all the businesses in every neighborhood and every community across the city. Because of that, businesses were paying $5,000 to $20,000 in fines. $20,000 in fines means their rent, means their business, and the city should have been more sensitive to the idea that this was happening in a very egregious manner, and we should have put the brakes, investigate what was happening before issuing all these fines on our small businesses. Two, a lot of these signs and awnings have been up for 20, 30 years.
Correct.
And it was very shocking and surprising to these businesses that years later, all of a sudden the city has an issue with a sign that's been up for a very long time. So I thought that was one of those common sense situations where government should have taken a role and said, something's happening here that's having a negative impact on our small businesses across the city. We should not go out and find these businesses. But that's not what happened. So I had to put a bill in to force the city to refund all the money to our small businesses, but also stop the fines on awnings across the 5 boroughs. It is getting harder and harder to be a small business owner. I hear this New York City is the toughest place in the country to open up and run a business in. As public advocate, I would advocate for 2 things. One, there's a bill in the City Council called the Small Business Job Survival Act, SBJSA.
Correct.
And what that bill does is allows for small businesses to negotiate their terms of their lease with the owner of that building. We're seeing a lot of building owners now raising the rents $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month to these small businesses because they hope to attract a bank, or they hope to attract a big box store instead, and push the small business out. We're seeing a lot of empty storefronts because of that, and that's having a negative impact on the character of our city. I will also advocate for commercial rent control in Albany. I will go up to Albany, push the governor, push the state legislator to finally create real protections for a small business. So when every time their lease expires, that they won't feel that they have to give up their business, but that they can make a decision on whether or not they want to move or not.
If you're the newly elected public advocate, there's also been much criticism against the former public advocate that she's, been involved in a lot of the pay-to-play corruption by Mayor de Blasio. But where do you see yourself standing or opposing, the mayor if issues like this come up?
Yeah, so I want to make it very clear. There's a lot of candidates who run for office and promise the world a lot of things.
Right.
My record has shown that when I talk about supporting small businesses or homeowners or tenants, I have a record of legislation showing that I've done all of that. Right. I am the one candidate in this race that probably has passed more legislation to help sustain our small business in our city. When you come from the awning fees, when you talk about this Office of Nightlife I created and got rid of a cabaret law to help our restaurants, to help our bars and our music venues stay open. These are all ideas I created because I wanted to make sure that these small businesses had a fighting chance of staying in our city. So as public advocate, I will continue that work. There's nothing I feel that's more important to our local communities than to supporting that mom and pop shop that provides everyday services to the people who live in those communities. You know, the reason Jackson Heights is Jackson Heights is because of the amazing restaurants that are there. You know, the reason Williamsburg is Williamsburg, Brooklyn, because of all of the amazing music and entertainment that's there. So we have to be very conscious of all of that, and we have to push more and not be afraid to understand that small businesses are not just ATMs for the city to pull money from. These are businesses that are creating jobs. They employ the most amount of New Yorkers than any other industry in our city. So we have to do everything we can to support them. And as public advocate, I will do everything I could to support them.
All right, I'm going to move on to another topic when we talk about affordability. As we all know, affordable housing is a vital issue as for any small business owner. I mean, affordable rent is another thing, but affordable health care. Now, the mayor recently touted $100 million for his new plan, which he hopes will cover at least over 300,000 undocumented and as well as another 300,000 members who were not in the system prior. However, some analysts have basically examined it, and they said to cover one person, to fully cover one New Yorker, would cost the city about $4,500, and to cover all 300,000 undocumented people will run the city over $1 billion, $1.3 billion. That's the figures that some analysts, independent analysts, have stated. Do you agree with the mayor on this? Because I know you've also been an advocate for equal health care, health care equality for everyone. So, and what is legislation? What's your legislation in terms of that, or what are you planning to propose?
Yeah, so, I just want to give some history. I mentioned earlier, I am a son of immigrants. Right. My mom actually was a home health care worker. Because she had that job, we as her children were able to get free health care. I remember specifically how important that was. She was able to take us to the hospital without being concerned about tacking on big fees and big payments. We were able to get dental. Everything that we needed as children was actually paid by her health insurance. And I think it's absolutely vital that every family has the same opportunity. And we have to find creative ways to do that. I think what the mayor is doing here is a very creative approach and making sure everyone has the health care that they need and deserve to live a healthy lifestyle here in New York, and not to fear that they won't be able to extend their lives because of the fact that they can't afford to. I think we have to make sure that everyone who needs health care should have access to it. I've been advocating for the state to pass universal health care, for the state to make sure that Medicaid is available to all New Yorkers. What we have here is a mayor who's being proactive and trying to figure out what can we do now in the interim while we figure out what's going to happen in the state and on a federal level. So I applaud him. I think it's great. I haven't looked at the numbers exactly whether or not the numbers will work in the end, but I think that we should take this first step. And I will definitely investigate whether or not it works. But at the end of the day, the goal is to make it work so that no immigrant family, no undocumented, no one who's not covered doesn't feel that they don't have the proper access to health care.
All right, talking about investigating city agencies and also seeing when things are not working efficiently. I mean, and we again bring reference to Mayor Bill de Blasio, but he was a few days ago seen on The View, basically challenged by Whoopi Goldberg about 87 protected bike lanes. That's a soundbite I've heard from quite a number of people. They're unhappy about the amount of bike lanes because they feel, especially in the city, but in Brooklyn, some people are wondering, well, why are the bike lanes there if it's not being used? Your response to that? I mean, and also in terms of Department of Transportation, how does one go about, basically like if they have a complaint about it, what sort of issues, how do you tackle that as the newly elected public advocate?
It's a very touchy issue for a lot of New Yorkers, especially for those that drive.
Right.
Right. They see bike lanes as a nuisance. As a driver, I used to feel the same way, so I understand the mentality that a lot of drivers have. But when you think deeper and you think about the purpose of those bike lanes, is to create safety, is to also encourage people to want to ride a bike instead of getting a car. These bike lanes, while they may create congestion in certain neighborhoods, I think in the long run will incentivize for there to be less cars on our roads, and possibly, if implemented correctly down the line, we'll see less traffic congestion because people are either biking or taking the train instead. So I think it's important that we see the value of bike lanes. We want to protect people who are riding bikes. We don't want to have any fatalities. We don't want to have a family member who rides a bike to continue putting themselves in dangers. We have a lot of delivery men also who go out and ride their bikes. We want to make sure that they're safe when they're on the streets. And it's part of creating a sustainable city, you know. But, you know, we have to look at, you know, if it's being done in a smart manner. Are we putting them in areas that they probably don't make the most sense? And I think those are the conversations we should have. But at the end of the day, I truly believe that bike lanes are an important, integral part of the overall ecosystem of our city.
All right, wonderful. So as we are moving on to something else, I mean, when we talk about bike lanes, as mentioned, the Vision Zero initiative, which I applaud the mayor for that one, has produced the least amount of vehicular fatalities. And also another thing that I would have to applaud him on is that with many of the community policing, that for the first time there's been less and less arrests and crime has actually gone down. But still, many people feel that in certain areas, in particular in Brooklyn as well, that there's a little bit of, like, you know, I mean, sometimes in some areas they have to be vigilant, and there can be more of, you know, community policing and whatnot. Some communities feel that there's a lack of communication between them and police officers. As a public advocate, how do we basically go about, you know, I mean, changing that?
I think it's important that we continue improving police and community relationship. I represent East New York, has the largest police precinct in the city, 75th precinct. Means that over the years we've had the highest crime numbers. We also had the highest stop and frisk numbers. We also had the highest complaints on 311 to make sure the police are out there policing certain neighborhoods, certain communities. So I think that we have to strike a balance, right? Fighting crime is important. There's still a lot of communities in our city that are not as safe as many others. You know, the NYPD and the mayor tout that the city is safer as ever been. But if you go into neighborhoods like the ones I represent, like East New York, there are still areas where it's not safe, especially for the youth and the teenagers who are surrounded by gangs, who are surrounded by other hazardous environments. But the NYPD, number one concern should be, how do they interact with the public?
Right.
How do they play an active role in ensuring that the public feels safe and the public feels respected by their presence? I've been working in my community, and I think we found a very innovative way to start that conversation. We are creating currently East New York's first community center. And this community center is going to have programs for the youth like boxing, dancing, computers, arts, and it'll be open all day and all week. But that space will also be partially run by the NYPD. So the NYPD will be offering programs there, meaning that they'll be interacting with the community on a daily basis. The youth will be interacting with the police on a daily basis, and it'll help build that trust and those conversations that we need to have on a daily basis, right? I think a lot of police officers are probably for the first time being exposed to be in communities like East New York, and those opportunities are perfect opportunities for them to understand the complexities and the diversity of the neighborhoods that they're working in.
All right, so let us now assume, I mean, well, I don't want to say let's assume, I mean, because with everything that you've said, actually, I can see it, that after February 26th, we'll announce you as Mr. Public Advocate. So let us say that it's past February 26th, you're now the newly elected Public Advocate. First bill or something that you want to introduce or co-sponsor, what would that be?
Well, first week I'll come back on your show to say hello to everyone.
I would love that.
And then the first thing that I'm really looking to do is institute, outside of policy, a strong community engagement team in my office,
right,
so that every neighborhood could have a liaison where if their issues are not being heard, my office will take the lead role in pushing it to the mayor's office so that your issues could be front and center, right? My job is to be your mouthpiece. I will be your mouthpiece.
Right.
And I promise to go out and listen. But when it comes to legislation, I look to do a lot of work around the environment, as we mentioned earlier. We talk a lot about climate change and the planet, but we also don't talk about the environmental impact in our own communities. Their communities have very poor air quality, meaning we have a lot of high asthma rates. And there's a lot of high asthma rates in communities of color and immigrant communities like the ones I represent, and most likely where you live. So it's important that we clean the air, clean the water, provide more green space, and I think that overall will help, create more healthier children. Our children will be exposed to a healthier environment, meaning they'll perform better in school. They'll have less health-related issues, and we'll create more healthy environments. Two, small businesses continue to be a priority of mine. I want to make sure that I'm advocating for SBJSA and I'm advocating for universal rent control. So I will definitely do that. And then three, I think overall affordability. How do we help our homeowners who are facing high property taxes, and how do we help the tenants and making sure that when housing is being built, it is truly affordable for the people who live in those communities. What we're seeing a lot of is luxury condos being built in neighborhoods where the people who live there cannot afford to pay $4,000 in rent for a luxury apartment. How do we build truly affordable housing for the people in those communities?
Definitely. When we talk about housing, I think that this might probably be the final issue that we would be able to cover today. But many people who are long-term residents, actually in various neighborhoods, they've actually stated that with new homeless shelters being introduced into their communities, that they're not happy about that because it devalues their property. What do you say to them? Actually, I think since in our final few moments,
homelessness has skyrocketed.
Right.
I don't think what I'm going to say is to the people in those communities. What I'm going to say is to the mayor's office. We have to stop building homeless shelters. We have to start building housing. Yes, let's build real affordable housing. I don't think that any New Yorker would want to live in a shelter. I think everyone who's in a shelter would rather be in a warm home, and that's what we should be focusing on. The mayor at one point touted that he will build over 90 homeless shelters over the next few years. Why are we not building over 90 apartment buildings so that we can house those New Yorkers who need those homes?
But in our final few moments, I would like to give you the floor for the final time to let all our viewers know why Councilmember Rafael Espinal is the ideal choice to be our next public advocate. So you can go right ahead with that.
Yeah, I think I bring, my experience in my work. I've done work that has affected all communities. I'm not the type of elected official that only focuses on one group. I think that we as all New Yorkers need to work together to build New York City and making sure that we all are able to continue living here. I grew up here my entire life as a son of immigrants, so I understand the complexities that we are all facing. Whether you're an immigrant who just came here or you're a son of immigrants, I understand that we should be working to making sure you have the resources you need to be able to live the American dream in this country. But also as a New Yorker, I feel what you feel. And it's that New York City has become less and less livable. It's getting harder and harder. Your rent has gone too high, your property taxes have gone too high, paying your small businesses, it's much harder to open a business here in the city. When you think about your schools, we need more investments. A lot of our green spaces and parks are being built on. And I feel that what we've been missing is a leader who is going to create a real comprehensive plan of how do we deal with all of those issues to make sure that we create a very livable city. We have leaders that in the past, in the present, who are actually running in this race, who've had the opportunity to make the right investments, to fix NYCHA, to fix the MTA, and they chose to ignore those issues because they wanted to focus on other things that were probably more important as a pet project to them than to the everyday necessities of us as New Yorkers. People are living in their apartments that are currently deteriorating because no one paid attention. They only paid attention when the news would make a big noise around the problems that tenants are facing. So we have to have someone who's going to look ahead, be able to see what those issues are. They're going to come down the road and start fixing them today and not wait till it becomes a bigger problem on our table. And I want to put one example out there. Amazon. A lot of residents in New York City, especially in Queens, are concerned about the price of living that's going to go up.
Yes.
Gentrification is going to be created by Amazon coming into our city.
Small businesses as well.
Small businesses as well. The $3 billion that the mayor and the governor were so easily able to find to give to the richest man in the world. These are all issues, again, that I think we should be thinking about how it's going to affect the future of our city. But about 4 candidates in this race signed a letter asking for Amazon to come to New York City, I was one that did not sign that letter because I saw the problems it's going to create for our city. And we have to have someone who's going to look ahead and understand the consequences of their actions. At the same time, those people who signed that letter now want to stand up and say that they don't want Amazon to come into our city. So, we need to have someone who is not going to be hypocritical, who's going to see the issues, attack the issue, and making sure that we put a plan forward that's going to be able to benefit all New Yorkers.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, earlier I said that one of the reasons why, I wanted to have the council member here, and one of the reasons why I'm happy to support him is because he's not a double standard council member, and of course, and that's one of the main reasons. Youth is one thing, but he proposes and produces, and I believe that that's why he will be the ideal choice to be our next public advocate. We wish him all the very best and looking forward to this continued discussion. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And friends, remember to go on out and vote. For more information, you can always get in touch with yours truly. This has been my time with all of you. We've enjoyed being in your company. We do hope you've enjoyed ours as well. Special thank you to Mr. Ravi Kumar, staff and management of ITV, and also everyone affiliated with the council member's office for making today's interview possible. Thank you so much.